So today children, let's start with the new chapter, tribes, nomads and settled communities. So you saw in chapters 2, 3 and 4 how kingdoms rose and fell. Even as this was happening, new arts, crafts and production activities flourished in towns and villages. Over the centuries, important political, social and economic developments had taken place. But social change was not the same everywhere because different kinds of societies evolved differently. It is important to understand how and why this happened. In large parts of the subcontinent, society was already divided according to the rules of Varna. These rules, as prescribed by the Brahmanas, were accepted by the rulers of large kingdoms. The difference between the high and low, between the rich and poor increased. Under the Delhi Sultans and the Mughals, this hierarchy between social classes grew further. Beyond big cities, now beyond the rule of this ruler, beyond the rule of rulers or beyond their people, there were other societies which were flourishing as well, and they were known as tribal societies. And these tribal societies, they were not following the rules which were laid by the rulers or brahmanas. They have their separate rules, and here everyone was equal. No high, no low, no poor, no rich. Everyone, they were same. So let's read. There were, however, other kinds of societies as well. Many societies in the subcontinent did not follow the social rules and rituals prescribed by the Brahmanas. Is it clear now? Nor were they divided into numerous unequal classes. Such societies are often called tribes. Members of each tribe were united by kinship bonds. Many tribes obtained their livelihood from agriculture. Others were hunter-gatherers or herders. Most often, they combined these activities to make full use of the natural resources of the area in which they lived. Some tribes were nomadic and moved from one place to another. A tribal group controlled land and pastures jointly and divided these amongst households according to its own rules. Many large tribes thrived in different parts of the subcontinent. They usually lived in forests, hills, deserts and places difficult to reach. Sometimes they clash with the more powerful caste-based societies. In various ways, the tribes retained their freedom and preserved their separate culture. But the caste-based and tribal societies also depended on each other for their diverse needs. This relationship of conflict and dependence gradually caused both societies to change. Now, who were tribal people? Contemporary historians and travelers give very scanty information about tribes. Scanty information means there was no genuine evidence or there was no complete knowledge about them. A few exceptions apart, tribal people did not keep written records. So, as there were no written records of what they did, what was their way of earning, what they eat. That is why they had the scanty information, they had less information. But they preserved rich customs and oral traditions. These were passed down to each new generation. Present day historians have started using such oral traditions to write tribal histories. Tribal people were found in almost every region of the subcontinent. The area and influence of a tribe varied at different points of time. Some powerful tribes controlled large territories. In Punjab, the Khokhar tribe was very influential during the 13th and 14th century. So the tribal society in Punjab is known as Khokhar tribe. Later the Gakhars became more important. Their chief Kamal Khan Gakhar was made a noble, Mansabdar, by Emperor Akbar. In Multan and Sindh, the Langhas and Arghuns dominated extensive regions before they were subdued by the Mughals. The Balochis were another large and powerful tribe in the northwest. So you have to learn all these names. They were divided into many smaller clans under different chiefs. Now, what is the definition of a clan? A clan is a group of families or households claiming descent from a common ancestor. Tribal organization is often based on kinship or clan loyalties. So, in short, this means that they belong to the same family. Their ancestors were related to each other. So let's proceed. In the Western Himalaya lived a shepherd tribe of Gaddis. So in Western Himalaya, the tribe was known as shepherd tribe of Gaddis. The distant northeastern part of the subcontinent too was entirely dominated by tribes, the Nagas, Ahoms, and many others. In many areas of present-day Bihar and Jharkhand, Chero chiefdoms had emerged by the 12th century. Raja Mansingh, Akbar's famous general, attacked and defeated the Cheros in 1591. A large amount of booty was taken from them, but they were not entirely subdued. Under Aurangzeb, Mughal forces captured many Chero fortresses and subjugated the tribe. The Mundas and Santals were among the other important tribes that lived in this region and also in Orissa and Bengal. So Mundas and Santals were the tribes of Orissa and Bengal. The Maharashtra highlands and Karnataka were home to Kolis, Berads and numerous others. Kolis also lived in many areas of Gujarat. So Kolis used to live in Maharashtra, Karnataka and Gujarat. Further south there were large tribal populations of Koragas, Betars, Marathwars and many others. The large tribe of Bhils was spread across western and central India. By the late 16th century, many of them had become settled agriculturalists and some even zamindars. Many Bhil clans nevertheless remained hunter-gatherers. The Gonds were found in great numbers across the present-day states of Chhattisgarh, Madhya Pradesh, Maharashtra and Andhra Pradesh. How nomads and mobile people lived. The nomadic pastoralists moved over long distances with the animals. They lived on milk and other pastoral products. They also exchanged wool, ghee, etc. with settled agriculturists for grain, cloth, utensils and other products. Now figure 2. Bhils hunting deer by night. Then figure 3. This is the figure 2. This is figure 3. A chain of mobile traders connected India to the outside world. Here you see nuts being gathered and loaded on the backs of camels. Central Asian traders brought such goods to India and the Banjaras and other traders carried these to local markets. They bought and sold these goods as they moved from one place to another, transporting them on their animals. Now let's read about the nomads and itinerant groups on this orange box on the right hand side. Nomads are wandering people. They used to wander from one place to another. Many of them are pastoralists who roam from one pasture to another with their flocks and herds. Similarly, itinerant groups such as craftspersons, peddlers and entertainers travel from place to place practicing their different occupations. Both nomads and itinerant groups often visit the same places every year. Now let's come back to a paragraph. The Banjaras were the most important trader nomads. Their caravan was called Tanda. Sultan Alauddin Khalji, who was the ruler of Delhi, or you can say Sultan of Delhi in chapter 3, used the Banjaras to transport grain to the city markets. Emperor Jahangir wrote in his memoirs that the Banjaras carried again on their bullocks from different areas and sold it in towns. They transported food grain for the Mughal army during military campaigns. With a large army, there could be 1 lakh bullocks carrying grain. Now, who were the Banjaras? Peter Mundy, the English trader who came to India during the early 17th century, had described the Banjaras. In the morning, we met a tanda of Banjaras with 14,000 oxen. They were all laden with grain such as wheat and rice. These Banjaras carried their household wives and children along with them. One tanda consists of many families. So, a tanda will be a group which has many families. Their way of life is similar to that of carriers who continuously travel from place to place. They own their oxen. They are sometimes hired by merchants, but most commonly they are merchants themselves. They buy grain where it is cheaply available and carry it to places where it is dearer. Dearer means it is not cheap, it's expensive. From there they again reload their oxen with anything that can be profitably sold in other places. In a tanda, there may be as many as 6 or 700 persons. They do not travel more than 6 or 7 miles a day, that too in the cool weather. After unloading their oxen, they turn them free to graze as is, there is enough land here and no one there to forbid them. Now the question, find out how grain is transported from villages to cities at present. In what ways is this similar to or different from the ways in which the Banjaras function? So, as you all know, the transport has developed a lot nowadays. So, there are many transport facilities which carry or which transport grains nowadays. Let's come to the next page. Many pastoral tribes reared and sold animals, such as cattle and horses, due to the prosperous people. Different castes of petty peddlers also traveled from village to village. They made and sold wares such as ropes, reeds, straw matting, and coarse sacks. Sometimes mendicants acted as wandering merchants. There were castes of entertainers who performed in different towns and villages for their livelihood. Now, this figure 4, this is a bronze crocodile. Kutia Kon tribe, Orissa. Changing society, new castes and hierarchies. As the economy and the needs of society grew, people with new skills were required. Smaller castes or jatis emerged within varnas. For example, new castes appeared amongst the Brahmanas. On the other hand, many tribes and social groups were taken into caste-based society and given the status of jatis. Specialized artisans, smiths, carpenters, and masons were also recognized as separate jatis by the Brahmanas. Jatis rather than varna became the basis for organizing society. Deliberations on Jati. A 12th century inscription from Uyyakondan Udayar in Tirucha, Tiruchirappalli Taluka in present-day Tamil Nadu describes the deliberations in a sabha of Brahmanas. They deliberated on the status of a group known as Rathakaras, literally chariot makers. They laid down their occupations, which were to include architecture, building coaches and chariots, erecting gateways for temples with images in them, preparing wooden equipment used to perform sacrifices, building mandap, making jewels for the king. Among the Kshatriyas, new Rajput clans became powerful by the 11th and 12th centuries. They belonged to different lineages such as Hunas, Chandelas, Chalukyas, and others. Some of these too had been tribes earlier. Many of these clans came to be regarded as Rajputs. They gradually replaced the older rulers, especially in agricultural areas. Here, a developed society was emerging, and rulers used their wealth to create powerful states. The rise of Rajput clans to the position of ruler set an example for the tribal people to follow. Gradually, with the support of the Brahmanas, many tribes became part of the caste system. But only the leading tribal families could join the ruling class. A large majority joined the lower jatis of the caste society. On the other hand, many dominant tribes of Punjab, Sindh, and the northwest frontier had adopted Islam quite early. They continued to reject the caste system. The unequal social order prescribed by Orthodox Hinduism was not widely accepted in these areas. The emergence of states is closely related to social change among tribal people. Two examples of this important part of our history are described below. A closer look, the Gonds. So this figure 5 is a Gond woman. The Gonds live in a vast forested region called Gondwana, or country inhabited by Gonds. They practiced Shifting cultivation. Now, what is the definition of shifting cultivation? Trees and bushes in a forest area first cut and burned. The crop is sown in the ashes. When this land loses its fertility, another plot of land is cleared and planted in the same way. Let's come back to our paragraph. The large Gond tribe was further divided into many smaller clans. Each clan has its own Raja or Rai. About the time that the power of the Delhi Sultans was declining, a few large Gond kingdoms were beginning to dominate the smaller Gond chiefs. The Akbarnama, a history of Akbar's reign, mentions the Gond kingdom of Garha Katanga that had 70,000 villages. So you can imagine how vast this tribe was. The administrative system of these kingdoms was becoming centralized. The kingdom was divided into ghars. Ghar. Each ghar was controlled by a particular Gond clan. This was further divided into units of 84 villages called Chaurasi. So Chaurasi is a Hindi word of 84 as well. The Chaurasi was subdivided into Barhots, which were made of 12 villages each. So first there was Gar. Each Gar was further divided into units of 84 villages called Chaurasi, and the Chaurasi was subdivided into Barhots, which were made of 12 villages each. The emergence of large states changed the nature of Gond society. Their basically equal society gradually got divided into unequal social classes. Brahmanas received land grants from the Gond Rajas and became more influential. The Gond chiefs now wished to be recognized as Rajputs. So, Amandas, the Gond Raja of Garha Katanga, assumed the title of Sangram Shah. His son Dalpat married Princess Durgavati, the daughter of Salbahan, the Chandel Rajput Raja of Mahoba. Dalpat, however, died early. Rani Durgavati was very capable and started ruling on behalf of a 5-year-old son, Bir Narayan. Under her, the kingdom became even more extensive. In 1565, the Mughal forces under Asaf Khan attacked Garha Katanga. A strong resistance was put up by Rani Durgavati. She was defeated and preferred to die rather than surrender. Her son too died fighting soon after. Garha Katanga was a rich state. It earned much wealth by trapping and exporting wild elephants to other kingdoms. When the Mughals defeated the Gonds, they captured a huge booty of precious coins and elephants. They annexed part of the kingdom and granted the rest to Chandra Shah, an uncle of Bir Narayan. So Bir Narayan was the son of Rani Durgavati, whom we read on the last page. Despite the fall of Garha Katanga, the Gond kingdom survived for some time. However, they became much weaker and later struggled unsuccessfully against the stronger Bundelas and Marathas. The Ahoms. The Ahoms migrated to the Brahmaputra valley from present-day Myanmar in the 13th century. They created a small state by suppressing the older political system of the Bhuyans, landlords. During the 16th century, they annexed the kingdom of the Chutias, 1523, and of Koch Hajo, 1581, and subjugated many other tribes. The Ahoms built a large state, and for this they used firearms as early as the 1530s. By the 1660s, they could even make high-quality gunpowder and cannons. However, the Ahoms faced many invasions from the southwest. In 1662, the Mughals under Mir Jumla attacked the Ahom kingdom. Despite their brave defense, the Ahoms were defeated. But direct Mughal control over the reign could not last long. The Ahom state depended upon forced labor. Those forced to work for the state were called pikes. A census of the population was taken. Each village has to send a number of pikes by rotation. People from heavily populated areas were shifted to less populated places. Ahom's clans were thus broken up. By the half of the 17th century, the administration became quite centralized. Almost all adult males served in the army during war. At other times, they were engaged in building dams, irrigation systems, and other public works. The Ahoms also introduced new methods of rice cultivation. Ahom society was divided into clans or khels. There were very few castes of artisans, so artisans in the Ahom areas came from the adjoining kingdoms. A khel often controlled several villages. The peasant was given land by his village community. Even the king could not take it away without the community's consent. Originally, the Ahoms worshipped their own tribal gods. During the first half of the 17th century, however, the influence of Brahmanas increased. Temples and Brahmanas were granted land by the king. In the reign of Sip Singh, 1714 to 1744, Hinduism became the predominant religion. But the Ahom kings did not completely give up their traditional beliefs after adopting Hinduism. Now this is the figure 7 and these are ear ornaments. Cowboy Naga tribe Manipur. Let's come back to the paragraph. Ahom society was very sophisticated. Poets and scholars were given land grants. Theatre was encouraged. Important works of Sanskrit were translated into the local language. Historical works known as Buranjis were also written, first in the Ahom language and then in Assamese. Conclusion. Considerable social change took place in the subcontinent during the period we have been examining. Varna-based society and tribal people constantly interacted with each other. This interaction caused both kinds of societies to adapt and change. There were many different tribes and they took up diverse livelihoods. Over a period of time, many of them merged with caste-based society. Others, however, rejected both the caste system and orthodox Hinduism. Some tribes established extensive states with well-organized systems of administration. They thus become politically powerful. This brought them into conflict with larger and more complex kingdoms and empires. Now let's read the blue box, the Mongols. Find Mongolia in our atlas. The best known pastoral and hunter-gatherer tribe in the history were the Mongols. They inhabited the grasslands, steppes of Central Asia, and the forested areas further north. By 1206, Genghis Khan or Genghis Khan had united the Mongol and Turkish tribes into a powerful military force. At the time of his death, 1227, he was the ruler of extensive territories. His successors created a vast empire. At different points of time, it included parts of Russia, Eastern Europe, and also China and much of West Asia. The Mongols had well-organized military and administrative systems. These were based on the support of different ethnic and religious groups. So, from this we came to the end of the chapter. Thank you.